Hey, everybody, welcome to Resiliency Radio, your go-to podcast for the most cutting-edge insights in integrative and functional medicine. I'm your host, Dr. Jill, and with each episode, we dive into the heart of healing and personal transformation. Join us as we connect with renowned experts, medical thought leaders, innovators, and everyone in general who wants to change the face of how we do medicine and how we help people to heal. I'm here today to empower you with optimal health and healing and with insights and hopefully just aha moments that maybe transform your path to that optimal healing. Today, I'm super excited to have my guest. I was on their podcast recently. I want to introduce her. Brooke is a board certified health and wellness coach, entrepreneur, and co-founder of Gold Ivy Health Company, podcast host, and a group fitness instructor. After spending 5 years as a medical mystery, Brooke now takes what she's learned to empower women to never stop advocating for their health and to reclaim their power by healing from within. Brooke has transformed her own gut health and life and now has helped thousands to do the same. She uses ancient healing remedies, inner wisdom, and psychology of behavioral change to help women transform their pain to peace and frustration to freedom. I love that, Brooke. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm so honored to be here. Like you mentioned, you were on our podcast, Ivy Unleashed, and our audience loved you. And to now be on your podcast is such an honor. So thank you.
You're welcome. I had so much fun. I was saying it's just, we just connect on the heart level with people, and that was how we did. And it was just really, really great. And so glad to have you here. And I want to start, as always, my listeners know, with your story, your backstory, because I feel like that drives everything right. It's one of those things where, and again, we'll hear you in just a second here, but often we don't know it's coming and it sucks while it's happening and the suffering isn't fun. But through that, my biggest thing that I love to share with people listening is often it's in the darkest moments, it's in the suffering where we actually find ourselves and find sometimes even a greater purpose in life. So tell us about your story.
Yeah, there's no light without darkness.
Yeah.
Right? And if you would have told me that when I was in the midst of my healing journey, and my healing journey continues today, like I'm not healed, right? I like to say that of like I'm always healing, I'm always evolving, life gets lifey. But back when I was a junior in college, if you would have told me that, I would have. Ooh, I would have not liked those words. And that's because I was in such a dark place. I was a junior in college. I was in a summer internship that honestly was my dream internship. Life was really good. I was living in Florida for the summer. And towards the end of my internship, I started developing all these symptoms that I knew something wasn't right. But given the circumstances, it was a summer internship. I was in college. I was a woman. I was traveling. These were the things I was hearing from doctors when I would go in and say, why is my stomach hurt after everything I'm eating? Why is my face breaking out? Why am I really constipated? Why am I so anxious and depressed and fatigued? And I couldn't figure it out. And so, fast forward, I saw over 50 different doctors and practitioners. I went down the route of alternative medicine, seeing chiropractors and acupuncturists. And I finally stumbled into functional medicine, which is why your work and this podcast is so near and dear to my heart. I learned about functional medicine and I had an appointment. And in that appointment, she said, "Have you ever heard of a GI map test?" And I said, "No." 50 practitioners. And
Wow.
finally.
Yeah.
And it was that test that really gave me my answers. I was full of parasites and bad bacteria. And then that turned into doing a mold toxicity test. And it just kept unraveling. And as I would get deeper in that functional medicine world, my need for yoga and stress management and really these ancient tools that were free when functional medicine wasn't, that I was kind of able to bridge this gap of how do I keep getting the care I need but learn the basics of taking care of myself, right? Why did I get sick in the first place? And that led me to becoming a coach and a yoga instructor and a podcast host and all the things I am and why I'm here today.
I love that, Brooke, and thank you for sharing. It's so interesting because one of the things I know you and I share so much with our listeners and wanting people to hear is I am a practitioner, so I obviously have this, education and stuff to bring, but so often the biggest gift that I can give patients like you or like your experience or like anyone who comes in is how do I help them connect with their own innate wisdom? And I will say, as a patient, I've been both doctor patient with breast cancer, Crohn's, and everything. So often, what happened, even as I was in med school, even as I had a medical education, is I would relegate that authority to someone who I thought knew better than me. And the story of my gastroenterologist who said diet has nothing to do with Crohn's disease, right? I've told that many, many times, and my listeners have heard me, but in that place, I had this intuitive sense like that can't be true.
Mm.
So tell us about what were the things that maybe you had to question some of the things you were told, like it's all stress, it's all whatever, because that idea that I think when our mind says either that can't be true or what else is possible, these kinds of thought processes actually open us up, open our subconscious up to have a deeper understanding. So tell us about your journey to kind of reconnect with your own innate wisdom, because that at the core is the best healing.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I always say you're your own best doctor. And I did not believe that during
Yeah.
the midst of my journey because, you want so badly for this doctor to tell you what is wrong and to have that solution and that missing piece. And they wear this title. You're the authority. You should know this is your job. And so every doctor I would see, I would leave a little more broken,
Yeah.
a little more discouraged. And I would also leave a little more curious of, okay, my voice was taken, but this is not how my story ends.
Yeah.
That is what kept me going. This is not how my story ends. This is not how my story ends. And so, for anyone listening, right, if something in you knows that something's off, it is our job to listen to it and to get curious with ourselves. And so, I read the books and I found the podcasts. That's how I found functional medicine, was these podcasts of, okay, so doctors that I'm seeing, they're talking about acute illness.
Mhm.
And now there's this other type of medicine that's really talking about chronic illness. And maybe that's who I need to see. And so I really tapped into this curiosity and these resources that I had of other people that had healed themselves. And what were they doing? The stories they had of no one listened to me. And so it made me feel not alone. I didn't know any of these people,
Yeah.
right? But
Yeah.
through social media and the gifts of hearing their stories, and then also quieting that outside noise to be able to hear me of, okay, what is really wrong? And I just didn't give up, which is kind of, it's a tricky spot to be in. And anyone that can relate that's listening, it's, am I crazy?
Yeah.
Right? Is this all in my head? But we have this inner knowing that something is off. And I've learned that these symptoms, these signals we're getting, it's our body's way of communicating with us.
Yeah.
It's not a bad thing. It's not a good thing, right? It is what it is. And so it's our job to listen. And so I learned to meditate and I learned all of these natural healing remedies. I learned about coffee enemas. And it was in these coffee enemas, which is so wild, but it actually forced me to sit still
Yeah.
and to hear and to have these downloads from the universe of, okay, you're on the right track. Listening to your body, what responds well in my body.
Mhm.
So these doctors, they were the authority, but at the end of the day, I was the authority of my own health.
Yeah, I love the way you say that. So a couple of things I want to frame, and I think it's so important for our listeners to just realize they do have a voice. And there's a fine line. There's, a lot of influence out there that really have no degree or no health background. They might be telling their stories to inspire, but then they maybe don't really have the background of like a deep dive. And I always want to caution, like, just make sure you know who has credentials, who you're listening to on that side. But on this other side, it's so critical that like our allopathic traditional, I mean, I was steeped in this traditional medical training, and I know it firsthand, we are not taught nutrition. We are not taught root cause, which is diving deep, like in the stool testing that you had or the organic acids that I do. And every patient that comes in for me does all that testing. So I use that good science. So if you're listening out there, try to find, and even, nowadays there's some, it doesn't have to be an MD. There's a lot of good credentialed people that really know what they're doing. But also find someone that you resonate with, that actually listens to you and validates you. Because I know, as we talked, one of the most important things I can do as a patient walks in is actually really listen to their story, validate their experience, and certainly it's not all in your head. It's so connected. And I'd love to hear your take on this. One of the things that I experienced in medical school was you have to survive, right, in this world. And you're like going and for us, it was 36-hour shifts, and you don't eat and you don't pee and you don't drink and you don't sleep, and like you deny all your physical needs. So I had a really good lesson in how to completely shut down everything below the neck and be like, shut up you, like to my body and kind of tell it to behave so that I could do my thing. And then I realized in my healing, I had to go back down into my somatic body because our body is always like the gut upset or a little bit of heartburn or a little bit of anxiety. These are all signals that our body is giving us that something's not quite right. And maybe the food that we're eating, the environmental toxic load, but it also could be wrong relationships or the wrong job or the wrong sleep habits. How did you start to reconnect with, because it sounds like you, like me, had this little intuitive, little quiet voice that was starting to try to get your attention. But then as you meditated, as you found the right practitioners to validate that, you were able to listen more. How did you reconnect with that somatic feeling to help you to heal?
Yeah. The first thing that comes to mind is asking the right questions. So for the longest time, I would say, why is this happening to me? What is wrong?
Yeah.
Right? I would get so upset. And when I reframe that to what is my body trying to tell me?
Yes. Love.
What is really off here? What's the deeper thing going on? And it wasn't until I became a board certified health coach that I learned these techniques of positive behavior change and reframing. And so it was really cool because as I was studying, these aha moments were going off for me. So health became my world as I was trying to figure out my own health. And I knew, okay, the only way to make sense of this is if I can help someone else, if I can use my pain for good, like I will get a reward from this, was my thought process. And so as I was reading these books and then same thing, becoming a yoga instructor, I learned about really just the importance of slowing down and that our brain's job is to answer the questions we give it. So when I sit here and I calm my nervous system and I ask myself, what are you trying to tell me? This morning I have a stomach ache. Like, well, you didn't sleep well. You've been rushed since the moment you opened your eyes. It's go, 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 go. You're thinking about the next thing. You need to slow down. You don't need another cup of coffee. You don't need caffeine. So slowing down to be able to hear myself think and asking those questions, because ultimately I do know the answers. Yes, I needed the help with the stool test and certain things like that. But I always say 90% of what actually helped me was free. And it was really lifestyle changes. It was setting boundaries, but also having the courage to keep those boundaries of not working past a certain hour, not working on the weekends. And that's still something I am playing with and experimenting with because, like you said, how do you handle everything that life throws at you and then to still be healthy, especially in today's world? It is not easy.
Let's talk boundaries, because I have a feeling a lot of our listeners out there like, yeah, Brooke and Jill, come on, help me out with this. Because what I've seen in the last year, and I've been so deliberate, the year before, last 2023, I was signing books and going to premieres and movie and book and speaking, and it was amazing and beautiful and insane. And by the end of the year, I felt like I could barely get out of bed, and I was so exhausted. My adrenals were flatlined. And once again, I listened to myself in the early part of the year. I said, okay, this has to change, right? And my body's like, yes, please. And so I really was like, okay, I don't do overwhelm and I don't do overcommitment. And that was my 2024 promise to myself. So I had to very deliberately set these boundaries, and it's still hard. What would you tell the person out there struggling? Because what's happened is the demands on our time, the 24/7 access to us through our phones, through whatever else, the amount of information that's exponentially increasing is creating this urgency that's not true. And so as a coach, how do you talk to someone about these? How do they get out of that grind, that treadmill?
Yes, that urgency. It's
Yes.
so real. It's so real.
Mhm.
And I think one of the most important things to do and that I do is it true? Right? When you feel that come up, it's urgent. I have to respond. Like, is that true?
Yeah.
Like, no, this isn't brain surgery. They're gonna be okay. And just that slowing down, because when you're in that overwhelm, right, it's very easy to keep going. So the pause,
Yeah.
so you can slow down, calm your nervous system, tap back into that parasympathetic nervous system, and start small. Like if anyone listening is anything like me, okay, I'm going to do 10 things differently starting tomorrow. This is going to be great. I'm feeling so overwhelmed. I need to change all of these things. And then we don't do anything because it's way too much.
Yeah.
And so, okay, what can I start doing today? And so for me, it's having that discussion with my boyfriend of hey, I need lights to go off at 9 o'clock. Like I am really not feeling well. Here's what's going on. Here's honestly how I'm feeling, and I would really love your support. And he's like, okay, duh.
Yeah.
We have these stories in our head of I feel bad and the shame and the guilt. So starting slow, voicing what you need, and then putting the things in place to make that happen. Accountability is huge, right? Telling someone else about it. Right now, for me, that looks like I don't want to work past 6 o'clock.
Mhm.
I don't want to work on the weekends. That doesn't always happen because life isn't perfect,
Right.
right? You're not always going to see your boundaries because things happen. But I've at least set this expectation of this is what I'm working towards. This is what's important to me. I have it on the notes on my phone that I look at
Yeah.
every day. So I'm reminded of that. And I'm reminded of why is that important? Why, what am I actually going for? And right now, when I quiet down and I ask myself, like, what does success look like for me? And it looks like feeling fulfilled and feeling at peace. And a lot of the things on my to-do list don't correlate to that. And so just having that reminder has been a huge game changer for me. It's not about completing all of the things on the to-do list. Things are going to keep accumulating on that to-do list. So what actually feels good in my body, and how can I create a life that allows that to happen? Because ultimately we are in control. We do have the pen. We are writing the story. It's not going to change overnight, but having those little small steps, those little shifts that completely change the trajectory of where you're going.
I love that. And so I want to hear, like, take what you just said and give you some practical, and you kind of said some of this too, but for those listeners, like, what can we practically do? So the first thing I heard you say is looking at the list and first of all, kind of having your values. For me, it's like autonomy, freedom. I don't want to be told, like, I really value in my life being able to decide in real time what I want to do and what I don't want to do and how much I want to do. So that autonomy, freedom,
Mhm.
peace, like you said, is so key. In fact, I told the company the other day, no amount of money would allow me to do this if it took away my peace or my autonomy. There's just nothing worth it. So always valuing that in regards to especially even compensation. And then I heard you say like that reminders. I use reminders on my phone and I love that. I actually remind myself some of my own messaging, like how I want to appear in the world. Like
Mhm.
one of them is on my phone is it's the light of God within you that creates miracles in my life. So I kind of remember this gratitude that it's the divine like through me. If I see anything good in my life, I'm like, yep, I know where that came from. And it just keeps me humble and realizing like I am so lucky to be a transient, a conduit, transient conduit, whatever, for that light to flow within me. So, but that's a reminder on my phone to remind me where this light comes from and that I'm just a conduit. And then the other thing I heard you say, it kind of alludes to Byron Katie's work on the is this true, right? And if is it really true? And we kind of ask ourselves those things. So often we have a story around what's true and what's not true. And if we really ask, is that really true? How can I be sure that's true? And again, check out Byron Katie's work. It's amazing. The questions that she goes through, and you can kind of question our belief system. And as we question, when we say what else is possible, when we say, is this really true? We start to allow our subconscious to chew on that and open it up to maybe there's something else possible. Maybe this isn't true. And those are really powerful. And then the other thing I've heard before is like, as we look at my to-do list, which is sitting right beside me here, I might go down and say, does that item on my to-do list make me feel expansive and fulfilled and full of love and joy? Or does it make me feel contracted and smaller and unhappy? And again, not that we always like, I have to take out the dog or feed, whatever kind of thing. We might have something that is not always expansive. But if it's kind of the big goals or the thing we're going to spend our whole day on, we better make sure it's something aligned with our vision and not just something that someone else told us. And I've always heard the shoulds and the must, right? We have those things like, I should fulfill this. I should show up for this person. I must do this. And that's where we can start to question and say, is that really true? And what
Mhm.
I've learned this year, by way of a roller skating accident and a broken wrist, I had these two big obligations in February, and I was so excited to be part of it. They were full of joy, but I broke my wrist and I had to let them down. These two events where they literally planned on me as a main event, right? But what it taught me was, I mean, they went on fine without me, and it was like letting people down and saying, "I'm so sorry, I can't be there," was the practice, and it was so hard. But once I did, it was like, hey, it was just fine without me. And I didn't need to be there. And it taught me that no matter what comes, even if it feels like a massive obligation, if it really, really doesn't fit, or you're sick, or you're hurting, or things have changed, you can still say no, and you can let people down and it will still be okay, right?
Yes. Yeah. Saying no. There's
Yeah, how have you done
know
that? Tell
whose
us some
quote it
tips.
is. Yeah, I don't know whose quote it is, but the quote that no is a complete sentence and not feeling guilty for saying no. Something that really helps me is the reframe of when I say yes to someone else and I don't want to, it's saying no to me. So by me saying no to them, I'm saying yes to me. And this is actually very top of mind for me. So it's funny you bring it up. I've been talking to some friends lately about how November is going to be November. Like
Oh,
I'm going
that's
to practice
good.
saying no because I am in this space where we're building our business. We've got a lot of awesome momentum. And it's so easy as an entrepreneur getting started to say yes to all of these options or all of these opportunities, these unpaid things, these paid things. You see the value in all of them and, oh, who could I meet? And what could this connection bring me? But when you are doing it at the expense of your energy and your health, and right now, how I'm feeling is I need to take a beat. I get up at 4:30 a.m. to teach a 6 a.m. yoga class. Like I'm spreading myself very thin. And I feel that in my body and the symptoms that I'm having. So that's my cue of, okay, let's reel it in. Let's be very intentional with what we say yes to. And a simple rule I'm going to practice for everyone listening who's like, I need something tactical, is giving myself 24 hours before I say yes or no. So
Right.
let me get back to you. Like I'm just practicing that. Let me look, I'll get back to you. And that also helps with that urgency feeling. Like they will be okay if you wait 24 hours. And if they're not, well, then that opens a conversation and you can see why not, but most of the time they will be okay. So that's something I'm practicing in November is it's not a no forever, but right now I have to say yes to myself.
Yeah.
And I'm really excited to see what that brings as far as my creative juices and getting my nervous system to calm back down. I think that's something that everyone can relate to and have some help with if you're anything like me.
100%. And thank you for sharing the practical tips there because that's really what we need is like November. I'm going to remember that. I love it. I'm in the same space, like really, really, there is so much chaos, so much information overload, so much obligation feeling this 24/7 culture that I think we're not unique. I think probably everybody listening is feeling some of this urgency and some of this obligation. And there's nothing wrong with showing up for friends and family, showing up for yourself, showing up for loved ones. There's nothing wrong with that. But my history was doing all that at the expense of my own health and at the expense of my own needs and finding that balance. And I think now, today, more than ever, we are required to create this real important priority. And I always say there's like these circles, and the inner circle is like those core friends, loved ones, maybe spouse or partner, maybe your pets, whatever, like core inner circle, the people that you are going to be there 24/7 if they need you as much as possible. And then the rest of those people, because most of us have these friends networks that are really, really large and they're beloved and beautiful. But if we try to show up for every single, I mean, I have so many amazing friends, but if I tried to always 100% show up for every single one who asked of me, I would be flat on the ground and not I would not be able to survive. So even in a good situation, it's okay to say no. And we think
Yes.
that's one of the core things we're trying to say here.
Yeah. And if you can't fully show up for that person, right, it's doing them a disservice. That's something I always remind myself of. If I am no good to you, if I'm not okay. And that's with anything in life. You get all these opportunities, and I remind myself, it doesn't matter if I'm not okay. I can't fully show up and get all of the juice out that I want and be fully present. It's very hard to be present when you don't feel well. And this overwhelm, this urgency with all the information out there, it's not only boundaries, but I think with the health information too, like I just want to
Yeah.
highlight that. For me, I would cling to all of this information and okay, I need to try this diet and it's this supplement and I need to add this in. And it would get so overwhelming and it would make me so stressed that it would do the opposite.
Yes.
Right? I would look up all this information and I'd need to change all these things and it would just make me sicker. And so I finally caught this pattern. I'm like, okay. That's where this idea of you are your own best doctor comes in, because by looking at all this information, I was drowning out my own voice when ultimately it was my voice that was trying to tell me what it needed. So when you feel that overwhelm come up too, when you're listening to these podcasts or you're reading the books, I just want to call out, like, don't lose your own voice in there, because it is your best healing modality. Is what is your body trying to tell you?
Yeah. Oh, Brooke, there's so many pearls here you're sharing, and they're really important, and I can so relate. One of the things earlier you said that I want to come back to is the be still and the being. So I grew up in a culture of German farm family, work ethic, and do. Productivity is that the education productivity are all really, really high. Nothing wrong with that because it has made me who I am.
Right,
But
right.
I had to learn how to be still because nobody in my family knew how to sit. No one would sit around doing nothing. I mean, that was like I never had any examples. And again, no problem there because they created a very strong work ethic. But
Mhm.
let's talk a little bit about that because at least for me and probably you too, we have this idea that we're valued based on our productivity and what we bring into the world. Nothing wrong with that. But for me, it was really hard to feel like I was valuable if I sat still or didn't produce or if I took a day off. I mean, it was into my 40s where I actually like called in sick to, like a real, I was sick and I had to say, before that in med school and all that, it was show up no matter what. So how do we transition into the stillness and the being and that maybe even taking a whole day just for ourselves and doing nothing productive, like that's something that was so foreign to me, but I think heals us so deeply when we can do that.
Yeah, I love that you're bringing this up. First, what comes to mind is what is your definition of productive? Right? For me, and this is a practice. Let me call that out first, right? This is not something overnight. This is something I will forever be working on. And I know, Dr. Jill, you will too, is the doing nothing.
Yeah.
But it's the viewing doing nothing as recovering, as productive. Because by me doing nothing, I'm not doing it. I'm not doing nothing. I'm pouring into me. And just that simple reframe helps so much. So, for example, my boyfriend and I are watching football on Sundays. He's an NFL agent. So, for him, that is productive. And he gets to use that excuse, which sometimes is not
Yeah.
fair. For me, when I feel that urgency that, oh my gosh, I should be doing so many things. I should be meal prepping and it's Sunday and I should be reading a book. We all have that feelings, those feelings that come up. I just remind myself, I'm spending quality time with my boyfriend. Is that productive? To me, yes. Right? It's building our relationship, it's nurturing our relationship. So, how you speak to yourself is so important. Another great reminder is we always say, I'll rest when I get there. Right?
Uh-huh.
I'll be happy when I get there. And what I've started telling myself is, I will rest so I get there. Because
Brilliant.
if I'm burnt out, I'm not getting there.
Yeah.
So I rest so I can get there, not when I get there. It's these constant reframes
Yeah.
that we have to choose over and over and over again. And at first, it's really uncomfortable, right, to have a full day of doing nothing when you're so used to check, check, check it off. But you'll start to see, oh, this feels really good.
Yeah.
Okay, I can be a lot more productive throughout the week because I have energy. I have worked so hard Monday through Friday that I deserve at least one day a week to sit on my couch and not feel guilty.
Yeah.
Or if these feelings of guilt are coming up, why?
That's a great question, right?
Why is it that you feel guilty for
Yeah.
sitting there?
Yeah.
Because that's something to unpack.
Yeah. I had to really go to that place of the value. So the common
Mhm.
themes that we all have are, am I too much? Am I not enough? Am I worthy of love? And I could name a bunch of them, but they're all common to humans. And we all have these little stories we tell. And for me, it was, am I worthy of love or am I worthy of whatever in my life if I'm not productive? Like that to me was like a tied to value. And the truth is, just for being born, just for being, we are all worthy of love, but it's a hard lesson sometimes to really integrate that. So I like that you mentioned a practice, me too. And then the other thing you mentioned is sometimes as we sit still, I think I'll never forget being in an health entrepreneurial mastermind. And the speaker was talking about addiction. And I kind of tuned out because I've never really struggled with alcohol or drugs or any sort of addiction that I thought, right? I was like, oh, well, I'm not. I was listening, but kind of like, whatever, that's not me.
Yeah.
And then he looks at all of us like, all of you in this room are addicts. And you know what your addiction is? It's work and it's
Ooh.
accolades. And it's a socially acceptable form of addiction because you get all this praise in the world and you're successful and you're doing all this thing. So it reinforces your behavioral problem with work. And he started questioning us and it really hit me. And of course, that makes sense because I definitely. I love my work. And I think when you love it and you get fulfilled by it and you're helping the world, but I really had to re-examine if that was a coping mechanism. And this relates to our conversation about being still, because what happens is when we're working, any addiction is just a way to deal with our fear or our emotions that we haven't had the chance to process. So whether it's drugs or alcohol or shopping or binge eating or working, bingo. And what
Mhm.
happens then is, so when I would sit still, all of a sudden, emotions would come up, a little anxiety. Oh, I'm not being productive enough. Or maybe a little sadness. I feel alone today, and I didn't feel it when I was so busy. Or maybe someone feels like grief of an old thing they never grieved, loss of someone they loved. And for me, that busyness was my addiction to cover up the feelings that I had just shoved down and go work, work, work. And of course, I love my work, so I'm happy and joyful and everything. But when we slow down, I think part of the problem is sometimes uncomfortable emotions sneak
Mhm.
up and they bubble up. And I equated it to like a wave when it first started. When I first started sitting still, it was like so overwhelming. I felt like I was going to drown. Like, what is this? I got to get busy. But instead of going back to my addiction, I would sit with it and be like, no, 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 sweetheart, you're going to be okay. And then the wave would come over and it felt like it was going to drown me. But once I got through one session like that, I was like, oh, wait, I'm fine. And actually, I feel better. So
Yeah.
have you had that experience? You want to talk a little about the being still and what comes up in that? Because I think that can actually be the busyness and the work can be a coping mechanism, right?
Oh my gosh, every day that comes
Yeah,
up.
yeah.
And that's why for me, it has to be a practice. It has to be starting slow and starting small. So, for example, meditation, sitting for 5 minutes feels like eternity for most people. And when I first started, it felt like that for me. But can you invite the discomfort? Right? Can you show yourself that it's really not that uncomfortable? It's just not, it's just foreign, right? It's not comfortable because it's not the norm for you yet.
Right.
So it's scary, but it's okay. And so sitting in that, just 5 minutes, maybe it looks like a walking meditation where you're just slowing things down and allowing that to become your norm because it feels a lot better. It feels a lot better in your body and your nervous system. You can think a lot clearer. You can take the pause of, do I really want to say yes to this? Going back to those boundaries. Is this really in alignment with my highest good? Am I saying yes because I feel like I have to, or I should, or I
Yes.
must, or I actually really want to? So when you invite that discomfort, knowing that at the other side of that discomfort is what you want, right? It's easy to work. It's easy to take the drink to numb how those feelings that are coming up. But when you get curious of why am I even having those feelings in the first place, you get a sense of agency.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, I am in control.
Yeah.
I don't have to be in this environment. And so I think it gives you a massive confidence boost to say, I sat in the discomfort, I did the hard thing, and it taught me this about myself that I can now continue life living more in alignment with how I want my life to be. So if we can't sit still and we're human beings, not human doings, what is that showing us? Like
Oh,
we're going against culture.
yeah.
Culture is go, go, go. They want to overwhelm you with all this information. So I think it puts us in the power seat
Yeah.
of I'm not going to go with the norm. I'm going to stay aligned with what's true for me. And I love myself enough to take care of myself is ultimately what it comes back to. Right? That fear of I'm not enough, I'm not worthy. Where did that come from? And do you love yourself enough to end that story? And a lot of times it does take work. It takes therapy, it takes meditation, it takes pouring into you, but you are so worthy of it, of that time and that effort.
Oh, so beautifully said and so important. And you mentioned this earlier too. So often for me, if you really think about productivity, when I have created those spaces and those times or those walking meditations or times with friends or nature or just quiet, that's when I get inspiration and ideas. And I mean, I remember when 2021 came, it was literally January 1st, we're in the midst of the pandemic and
Mhm.
everybody is on screens. And I was like, are people reading books anymore? I had just been editing my book. And the idea came in the stillness and the quiet. I think I need to do a documentary. Now I have no clue what I'm doing, but what happened out of that is that one idea, sitting still, allowing the creativity, I have a documentary out now, and it came from sitting and being still. And so often our moments of what's next, or how we want to change our lives, or what we want to be involved in, or just a creative, if you're a writer or a creator of content or anything, it comes in those. If we don't have the margin, we actually squeeze out the ability to be creative and visionary in our lives. Have you had that experience?
Oh gosh, yeah. One of my favorite practices is asking myself questions before I sit down to meditate.
Good. Yeah.
What do I need to do? Like, what is my next move? Like, show me.
Yes. Yes.
Show me.
Yes.
Stepping out of the way, getting out of your own way. Exactly what you said, creating that space. And it may sound a little woo-woo-y, but just try it, right? Are you be open to experimenting with it, of sitting in stillness? Because going back to what I said earlier, your brain's job is to answer the questions you give it.
Mhm.
So, what is in my highest good? What do I really need right now? It might be as simple as do more of this, right? Meditate more. It
Yeah.
feels really good in your body. Or you get this idea of a documentary. Or maybe your next move is getting your yoga certification and doing that. Maybe it's leaving that job.
Mhm.
Maybe you're ready. Maybe it's sending that text. It's just trusting whatever comes in, like trusting your intuition. Going back, that's a
Right.
practice. But the more we listen and the more we do it, the stronger it becomes. It's just like a muscle. And then you start to see these signs and you don't question it.
Yeah.
You're like, yes, that makes sense. This feels right.
Oh,
And
I
it's not
love
until you sit in that stillness that you can regain that trust with yourself, is really what it comes down to. Is I trust myself to make the decisions that will support the life I want to live and to take care of myself.
so good. And in my own healing, I found that I couldn't really love myself unconditionally with self-compassion that I want to show the world. And we have to start with ourselves until I trusted myself. So this is really key, like learning your intuition. What does that voice sound like? What is it telling you? And then actually trusting that you do have innate wisdom. And of course, you can check it with experts. That's why we have them. It's not like you always have
Mhm.
to have all the answers, but you might have an idea. Like I was like, oh, diet has something to do with my Crohn's disease. And then I went and looked for the answers with the experts, and you reinforce that intuition. And then through that, trusting yourself, you can start to show yourself kindness and compassion in not overcommitting, not overwhelming yourself, and all these practices. Such good stuff, Brooke. Any last parting bits of wisdom, or if you could talk to your younger self, what would you have told her when she was really struggling, now that you know what you know today?
Yeah. I would tell her, listen to yourself. Echoing what we just said, one of my favorite stories to tell is about how I got out of my own way and how I asked the universe and God to show me. I was out with friends. All of the people I love were at this restaurant. Everyone's having conversations, and I can't be present because I feel so sick. And I'm in my head thinking, all of the people that love me have no idea how much I'm struggling and that I don't want to be here.
Mm.
And so I get home that night and I'm laying in bed just bawling, thinking, how did I get here? Lord, what do I do? Help me. And I got on my hands and knees and I said, I surrender. Just show me. Like I'm done. I'm getting out of my own way. And all I heard was functional medicine. I had known about functional medicine through podcasts I listened to, but it wasn't anything I seriously looked into. And hearing that, call it my voice, God's voice, the universe, whatever, I heard it so clear, got out my phone, found a practitioner, and it was one of the best things that ever happened to me because I surrendered and I asked to show me. I created that own space for those downloads, for those words to come through. And that's possible for anyone listening. Ask the questions and listen, and then take action based on what you hear and what feels good.
Oh, Brooke, I love that because I have experienced that so many times in my life where I'm just like, God, I surrender. I need your help. Please, please show me. And when we are in that posture of complete surrender and just open to guidance, it comes over and over and over again. I could tell story after
Yeah.
story after story of like, so many people are like, oh, you're such a great businesswoman. And I'm like, I just pray a lot. Like it's so funny because the truth is I literally like just I'm like, what do I do next? And God always gives me that insight and wisdom. And I really love that because I think if there's anything we can encourage in this crazy, crazy world with so much overwhelm, so much illness. Um, I know there's listeners of all faith backgrounds that listen, but I just want to say I'm going to stand here saying there is something greater out there that has your good. And if you listen and call out, you are going to find deep insights and wisdom. So I love that you you mentioned that. Where can people find you and all the wonderful work that you're doing? Give us your website. And if you're listening, we'll of course put this in the show notes, but tell us where we can find you, Brooke.
Yeah, so I run a company with my cousin, which is very fun, called Gold Ivy Health Co. So we're both health coaches, fitness trainers, and podcast hosts. Our podcast is Ivy Unleashed, where you'll find Dr. Jill's episode and so many other really inspiring stories. That's what we love. We have a virtual wellness platform that encompasses both mental and physical health. That's really what I love is this mind-body connection. So I would say best way to find us is just Instagram at Gold Ivy Health Co.
Awesome. And we'll put it, if you're driving, don't take time to take notes. It'll be in the show notes. Oh gosh. Thank you so much, Brooke, for coming on the show today.
Thank you so much. It was such an honor.
So fun. And all of you listening, thank you guys for tuning in again. If you have not subscribed, would you please hit the subscribe button? We are approaching 500,000 soon. I'm hoping by the end of the year on your YouTube channel. And you can find all the transcripts and downloads and everything at my website, jillcarnahan.com, if you want to go and download something or get the transcripts if you want to read through that. And of course, anywhere you listen to podcasts. And would you please leave us a review and just share it with friends if you enjoyed the episode? Awesome.